The man in the red pickup truck. This story happened about a year ago, but still creeps me out when I think about it. That being said, it's a little lengthy, but I think it fits here. I'm an adult male with a tall build at about 250 pounds who lives with my dog. My neighborhood is considered one of the nicer ones in my city, but isn't without its share of crime incidents. Most of these tend to be car break-ins, where people are looking for easy grabs left in plain sight, and in the worst cases, the rare robbery of college students not from the area or people walking around who are otherwise not paying attention to their surroundings. Growing up, I lived in much rougher parts of the city, so being alert and observant of one's surroundings has always been second nature to me, especially at night. So much so that when my dog and I go for his nightly walk, he knows that it's all about the business of doing his business and doing it quickly with no dilly-dallying. On this particular night, I was running late with a work project that had to get completed on time, and our walk was delayed about an hour past our regular time to 10 p.m. I absolutely hate going out too late. Already feeling anxious about missing our regular time, when other dog owners are out doing the same, something told me to make sure I carry this time. So after I got my dog in his harness and out the door, we started on our usual walk up the street, moving at a brisk pace. At this hour, the street is completely empty of pedestrians or car traffic, just eerily quiet. We get about halfway up the street before he starts sniffing around for a good area, when I spot a red pickup truck flying down the street well over the speed limit. The truck eventually comes to a screeching halt in the middle of the street, about 30 feet ahead of us. As soon as he hit his brakes, I quickly walked us a little further up as to put a row of the sporadically spaced parked cars on the street in between us and continue walking while maintaining eyes on the truck. As we walk by, the door opens and a guy gets out and is bent over coughing profusely, like a lot, and hacking up spit and whatnot in the middle of the street while holding on to the inside of his truck door with tinted windows. My dog and I both keep eyes on the guy as we're walking past, about 25 feet distance from him. He then looks up at me while still keeping one arm inside the car door and says, "Hey, can you come here for a second?" Without breaking stride, I say, "Yeah, probably not going to do that," while rotating my body and walking backward as we pass him as to not turn my back to him. While still backing away on our path, I ask him what's wrong. He then says, "I'm not feeling well. Can you please just come over here?" While still backing away, I tell him no, plainly, and that he can pull into any of the parking spaces on his side of the street and rest there until he feels better, or that I can call him an ambulance if he's really that bad off. Upon hearing this, his face contorted and went into a snarl. He was also suddenly no longer having coughing fits or under any sort of visible physical distress. Clearly pissed that I wouldn't cooperate, he then slightly closes the door a little so that it's still ajar, but his arm that was behind it is concealed behind his back now, and he started towards us saying, "Please come here, sir. I told you that I'm not feeling well." I then clip my dog's leash to my belt and get parallel against the side of a large SUV parked on my side the street, leaving about 20 feet between us. I also move my hand behind my back to the waistband and tell him that's close enough from behind the vehicle. He then stares at me, and I can literally see him working the math in his head on the chances of me bluffing, and he turns around and goes back to the truck, but doesn't leave. He reaches inside with the concealed hand and holds for about 10 seconds before he looks back at me over his shoulder and stares for 10 more seconds only to see that I'm staring at him also, haven't left my position next to the buffer vehicle, nor turned my back to him. He says something to someone else in the passenger seat, who is obscured by the tint, and then very quickly hops in, slams the door, and speeds back off up the street into the night. A creep tried to follow me home. This happened about a decade ago, when I was 19. At the time, I rented an apartment in a West Side neighborhood of Chicago with my sister, who was a year older than me. We both worked hospitality jobs in the city, and we both had pretty robust social lives, so it was fairly typical for one or both of us to get home at weird hours or be out all night. I'd take the Pink Line to and from work. At this point in my life, I was pretty used to being catcalled walking down the street. I'd been flashed on public transportation a few times. Men would bump into me from behind on packed trains, basically the usual amount of sexual harassment for a young woman living in the city. Not much fazed me. Of course it was uncomfortable, but I was never truly terrified, until one night. That night, I was coming home from work well after midnight. The train car I was in had been empty for most of the ride. One stop before mine, a man gets on and sits down in my car. Reflexively, I looked up as this new passenger entered the car. We made eye contact. Immediately, I felt the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. I knew I'd made a mistake, that this might be interpreted as some sort of invitation. I quickly looked away, but felt him watching me as the train pulled away from the station. Since my stop was only one stop away, I decided to wait until the last second to stand up and exit the car, just in case he tried to follow me. Well, he did. He hung back about 30 feet at first, but I felt the gap between us closing, and his footsteps were getting louder. Then I hear him trying to catch my attention, saying, "Hey!" He catches up to me and starts speaking to me like any other man trying to chat me up would. I still couldn't shake the feeling of genuine fear I'd had since first locking eyes with him in the train car. He asks where I'm headed, and I told him I was going home. He asked if there was anyone waiting up for me this late. I told him my boyfriend was. In reality, I knew my sister was working a night shift, and I was going home to an empty apartment. Then, he pulled his shirt to the side, exposing a gun in his waistband. In a joking tone, he said he'd fight my boyfriend for me. I laughed along and just kept walking. We were walking down Kermack, which is a pretty busy street, even that late at night. I knew I couldn't let him follow me to my apartment, so when I came to the cross street where I should have turned, I just kept going straight. Eventually, I had walked far enough that I passed the stop where he had originally got on the train. He walked alongside me for a while, then dropped back and followed me for a while, and eventually stopped. I thought I would be relieved once I'd shaken him, but as soon as I couldn't see him anymore, my fear only heightened. I still had to double back to my apartment somehow, and the trains had stopped running at 2 a.m. I figured he knew I'd walked too far and would have to turn around, so I thought it was possible he was posted up somewhere on Cermak waiting for me. I turned off and walked a few blocks north, and then started my 1-mile walk back west toward my apartment. The walk back was excruciating. Since I was now off the main road, it was much darker, and there was absolutely nobody around. I kept telling myself I had to get home safe for my sister, because she'd never be able to live with herself if something happened to me. I kept putting one foot in front of the other, and when I finally made it into my apartment and locked the door behind me, I collapsed in a puddle of tears. 10 years later, I've never felt fear again like I did that night. To this day, I've never told my sister about it. Who the hell was that? This happened at around 15 years ago, and nothing became of it, but it was so weird. I think about it regularly. I was 16 years old at the time. It was early evening, so getting dark but not yet pitch black, and I was walking home from the bus stop after seeing some friends. I just turned from the main road onto my quiet street when I heard my name being called by a male voice. I was still trying to figure out where the noise was coming from when I see a guy jumping out a car and jogging towards me, smiling. Again, he says my name and asks me how I've been. As he's getting closer, I'm waiting for the penny to drop. But even when he's close up, I realize I do not know this man, LOL. And it's clear from my face I'm confused. Seeing my confusion, he says, "Don't you remember me? It's me, X." And I say, "No, sorry, I don't remember meeting you before. How do you know my name?" He says something incredibly vague, that he's my ex's friend. And I say, "Okay, but what's my ex's name then?" And he starts laughing. I'm absolutely convinced we had never crossed paths before in our lives, and he looked like he was in his 20s. So how would he know my ex, who was my age? He still had this unwavering, creepy smile on his face. I think he was either high or drunk, but I started to feel unnerved and wanted to end the conversation ASAP. He asked me to come hang out with him, and I say no. Sorry, need to get home. He's being insistent, but I'm being firm and saying I need to get home. I'll get in trouble if I'm late. My parents are expecting me, etc. And I just try to end the conversation politely by saying nice to see you, but I have to go, and I start walking away. He seems to accept it and thankfully goes back to his car, and I feel relieved to see him drive away. Until I turn the corner. He's parked literally over my house's drive and is standing outside his car, again with the weird, intense smile. Now I'm fully freaking out. He's blocking my entrance to my house. I can't figure out if it's a fluke or if he knows where I live, but I don't want to walk into my home while he's there. I literally stop in my tracks, and he again walks towards me and starts with the "come hang out, we'll go for a drive," etc. I'm freaked out and also annoyed at the fact that he's not leaving it alone. So I say, "Dude, I don't know you. I'm not going to go for a drive with some random guy." He then laughs and points to his car and says, "But I'm with my friend." And for the first time, I look into the car and see a girl looking at me. She looks high out of her mind and is just staring directly at me. Honestly, my heart dropped looking at her face. She looked miserable and so spaced out. I can't remember how I got rid of him, but I just stood my ground and kept saying, "No, I don't want to go for a drive. I'm going home," etc. I stood in the same spot. There was no way I was going into my house while he was there, until he eventually gave up, got back in the car, and drove away. All while this girl still stared at me. Like I said, nothing ever came from it. I never saw the guy again. I have no idea how he knew my name. The girl in the car looked older than me, in her early 20s most likely. So at the time, I assumed she knew what she was doing, but every so often, I think of her and wonder if she needed help. Or maybe it was all innocent. I hope she's okay, though. Harassed, chased down by a car while walking with my mom. Okay, so for context for this story, I live in a pretty rural area. We live on the outskirts of our town, which already is small compared to the populations of the other towns in California. We're about 15 minutes from the small town and 40 minutes from the main city. We live down a dirt road with some neighbors. Our house has no other fences attached to ours, and on two sides of the house is only fields and dirt roads, one side having a single house in the field. The other two sides have a couple of neighbors down other roads, and nobody really interacts out here except my dad, talking to two of them sometimes. I was probably 12 when this happened. I had low self-esteem, and I wanted to start exercising more. I had been enrolled in a charter school due to bullying. Yes, that played into my self-esteem, but let's get on with the story. So I didn't really have many ways of exercise, besides a treadmill that we owned. I wanted to start getting fresh air too, so my mom suggested that since we live out here, that it would be peaceful to take walks down the back dirt road. I agreed, even though I was stubborn about it half the time, but we began walking and usually would go in the mid to late afternoon when it would start cooling down outside, but was still light. In case it got dark, we took our flashlight too. Being out here, it was notorious for stray dogs to sometimes make their way out here, and we would carry pepper spray and a mini bat, just in case one got vicious. However, a dog will play into this story. One day, me and my mom decided to go on a walk in the later afternoon. So me and my mom took off and started walking down the road. When you walk about a quarter of a mile down the road, you start to come towards a little cross-section. There's a road going left to the highway, a road going right to the neighbor's house, or the road goes straight down to a utility road. Me and my mom discussed walking down the utility road to get a good walk in, since it went on for a while. When we started getting to the crossroad, this dog came out of literally nowhere. We were looking at it, and it was in the center of the roads, staring at us. Me and my mom looked at it, and my mom said that she got this feeling in her stomach that we needed to turn around and walk home. So she grabbed my arm and started leading me back home, and then let go so that we could walk. We were in the midst of walking when she looks ahead and stops to stare at something. I ask what she's looking at, and she points. A white car pulled up to our fence and quickly backed up and shot down the road on the side of our house. Mind you, nobody ever goes down this road except one old man that we know. Anyone else who does usually is scoping out my dad's tools to steal. My mom said she felt a bit uneasy because of it and pulled me to the edge of the dirt road, almost into the field. The car had driven to the highway and left, or so we thought. We continued walking back to our house when this car comes back and drives down the road we were walking alongside. I caught a glimpse, and it was this smaller white car with black tinted windows that you couldn't see through. My mom instantly got a feeling of impending doom and pulled me into the field, not too far, but far enough. We kept walking through the field towards our house, getting closer now, when this car comes back down the road. My mom stops me in my tracks to see what the car is doing, and it drives back to our house and starts driving around it super fast. For context, we have a random road and area that goes around our yard on our property. My mom waits until the car drives back down the side road, and she tells me we need to start running. So that's what we did. We started running through the field, getting to one of the little sections near my yard. The car comes back and drives down the road trying to cut us off. Me and my mom are panicking at this point and have no idea who this is and why they're acting like this. The car circles around again, and my mom drags me to further to the right, I think, of where we were, and told me we're going to run down into the ditch. We get down in the ditch, and the car comes back around and pulls to the edge of the ditch where we were. The front of the car was facing us, and all I could think about was if it drove down, it would hit me and my mom and probably kill us. My mom quickly put her arm in front of me and stood dead still while I was literally horrified, and dropped our flashlight and I think my water bottle. The car was getting ready to drive down where we were, and then suddenly they backed up and drove around the yard, going back down the side road to the highway. Me and my mom felt like our souls left, and she tells me to run, don't look back, and get to the front gate. I run up the ditch, feeling my heart pounding. I run around the yard and towards the front gate, flinging I open, and I started running towards the front door. I did not hear my mom behind me. I was running to the door to open it right when I looked over and saw the car coming back down the side road. I ran into the house, trying to catch my breath. I saw the car drive down the road, and I didn't see my mom, so I was panicking. I ran towards the sliding glass door, and suddenly my mom comes running towards it and flings it open, running in and locking it. She tells me to go lock the front door while I try to catch my breath and tell her I was scared because I had no idea where she was. She went to chug some water from the fridge and told me that when I was running, she was trying to shut the front gate when she noticed the car coming back down the road. She said she knew she wouldn't have time to follow me to the door, so she ran behind my sister's car to stay out of view of the car, and when it drove back down the road, she took the opportunity to run to the back door since it was closer to my sister's car. It's crazy to think that if we hadn't seen that dog standing there in the road and decided to turn back, that we may have been run down. Fortunately, we haven't seen the car again, and think it may have just been some crazy person or druggie who just so happened to come down our road that day.